morning, beloved. Good morning. I'm Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner. My pronouns are she and her. And for anyone who is visually impaired, including those joining us online, I'm a short, middle-aged woman with some elevation in my step this day, and with a fervent faith that love holds us all, no exceptions. So in that universalist spirit, we say welcome to Beacon, where we don't believe one single thing, but welcome a diversity of belief, grounded in radically inclusive love, and committed now for over 110 years to being a beacon of that great love. My words come to you from our historic sanctuary at 4 Waldron in Summit, New Jersey, gathered on the ancestral and continued lands of the Lenni Lenape. Today's time together in our service is reflecting on desert times, on winter time as we approach the winter solstice. And we're going to take a little time to reflect on when things in our life seem without life, fallow, or even dead. Now, that might not be the holly jolly you came anticipating as we blaze our way toward Christmas Eve. But in this season of light, having just finished Hanukkah, I think it's also important to lean into the practice of stillness, of sitting in the darkness not as absence, but as presence, of having a practice of not only companioning joy, but also the grief that is woven often in this season. Being a people of radical inclusion, we are also invited and called upon to tell all the truth of being human, the holly, the jolly, and the hard. Years ago, I picked up a poster in White Sands, New Mexico, that explains how different life forms survive in the desert. I went on a hike and a retreat, and I got this poster here. It explained how life forms are able to grow quickly and adapt to high temperatures in radical ways. To only go out at night when the sun is long gone, how to grow tall so you don't get buried by a sand dune, and how to develop deep roots to source water when it is scarce, and to sustain high winds. What about you? I got a high wind warning this morning for Summit, New Jersey. So perhaps there are many lessons. I got it. Thank you. I got it. Perhaps there are many lessons that we can learn from desert times. As a metaphor, we are in desert times now. From world conflict, the desperate loss of life around the globe, Palestine, Israel, Yemen, Ethiopia, Ukraine, Somalia, I could go on and on. And the tremors we feel here, how we've fallen out of belonging with one another, with neighbors, within cities, within our state, within our country. And anyone in grief at this time of year, whether it is the first year or decades later after loss, knows that it can be hard to put on the holly jolly. So you don't have to put on here, beloved. If you have light and a lightness, we welcome it. And if it is hard to source the light this day, you can also rest here. Put down the mania of the season and take in a deeper light with us together. Come into this space. Let us be human together. May we belong here and welcome in a deeper light that is within each of us, always, even now. As we begin in this more meditative service this day, I want to invite you to remain seated for our opening hymn, which is number 225. It's found in your gray hymnal, O come, Emmanuel.
Rejoice, Emmanuel shall come within as light to dwell. Oh, come your wisdom from on high, from depths that hide within a sigh, to temper knowledge with our care, to render every act a prayer. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come within as hope to dwell.
Good morning, Beacon. I'm Scott Schnipper. My pronouns are he, him, his, and we embark on our chalice lighting. We kindle an enduring flame like the candles of the menorah, making a promise across generations. We cast a soft light, like the light from the distant stars, already gone, but still sending their love as someday you and I must too. We light slowly, like the candles of the Advent wreath, knowing it is a journey. We strike a pungent match. Sulfur hits the nostrils, reminding us that light does not arise from nothing. We hold our breath against the sturdy candle, call in the magic and play of the light. We gaze toward the shadows, knowing the darkness has life to bring forth yet.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Tuli. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a plus-sized woman from South Asia, today wearing a light blue tunic with a black sweater. So, hey there, Robin.
Hey there, Dr. Tooley.
So tell me, what mythology is your favorite?
Sorry, what?
Like Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Sumerian, Hindu, which mythology is your favorite?
Well, I love them all, especially like when Chad took us to the Morgan Library and we got to learn about Enheduanna, the world's first author, and also the priestess in the temple of Nana and Inanna.
Yes, exactly like that. Which one's your favorite?
That's like asking a baker to pick their favorite cake. I don't have a favorite, but I do have a story that I think we should tell today. In fact, you've already seeded it.
Yes, you got me. You got me.
I don't
So-
think they got the pun. Should we do it again? Slowly?
We seeded this.
Seeded it.
Seeded it.
Pomegranate.
And so this is the seeded. This is the
It's
Greek
gonna be a
myth
long
of.
service.
Greek myth of. Who said that? Persephone. Yes, exactly.
So we should tell the story.
Which version?
Touche. There are many versions of the story of Persephone. Persephone, the goddess of vegetation. She was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, but her happy life and her mother was sharply changed when her uncle Hades kidnapped her and took her down to the underworld.
What scary times those must have been. Wandering around what seems to me to be like a dry desert with no sign of life.
Especially for a vegetation goddess. At first, Persephone was terribly sad, and the story goes, this version at least, so was her mother. In fact, the whole earth, because of this great grief, started to die without Persephone there. She was a child of the spring and summer, always the light, always going.
So, did she survive this dark underworld place?
Well, she almost didn't. When we see images of her, she is normally shown carrying a sheaf of grain. Like when you plant a seed, it spends some time underground, and then it comes to the surface as new life. Persephone had to learn to grow very quickly, like sand verbena in the desert. She couldn't let the worst thing that ever happened to her define her, or the underworld would have swallowed her up.
Wow, what a time for her. Scary, and she had to grow up too. How did she manage to get out?
Well, eventually, her mother put up such a cry and lament for her return that the gods negotiated to get her out of the underworld. But before Persephone left, Hades gave her some pomegranate seeds to eat. They are a fruit of the underworld. She ate 6 seeds, and as this version of the story goes, that meant she had to return to the underworld every year for 6 months. So she became not only a vegetation goddess, but also queen of the underworld.
I can see why you love this story, Robin. Like, there's a bad guy, Hades, Persephone has to grow up fast, and as the myth goes, she spent 6 months of the year underground before returning to the surface. Makes me think of how we can't only live in the constant go, 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 and that sometimes things happen that are hard and scary, sad, or gloomy. And like Persephone, we can remember that the winter times in the underworld can be a site for growth and new life. Darkness can mean that seeds are just sprouting of who we are becoming.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we are taught darkness is scary, but we need the balance of light and dark, the cycle of the seasons, to live out all of what it means to be alive and to be human. Just think next time you are a little frightened when the lights go out, maybe you're just getting ready to become queen of the underworld.
Here ends our time for all ages.
I welcome Dennis Mannion forward, our Beacon chaplain for today.
Good morning, Beacon. I'm Dennis Mannion. I respond to he and him. And as Robin just said, I am a member of our Beacon chaplain team. Our role as chaplains is to extend the spiritual care of our community. We recognize that everyone needs care at different points in our lives, and as chaplains, we offer ourselves as a one-to-one resource for deep listening. If you'd like to speak with the chaplain or have questions about our chaplain ministry, please see me or any member of our ministry team after today's service. Or you can just go on our Beacon website for more information. And in another way, we extend the spiritual care of our communities by facilitating our weekly ritual of community candle lighting. Today, our first candle is a small beacon of both prayer and hope for peace, especially for all who are living with the threat and the reality of war. A candle for Ross Wagner, who was in the hospital with pneumonia and congestive heart failure. And a light as well for his wife, Kathy, and daughter, Suzanne. A candle for Alice Levine, a Beacon member whose ex-wife, Toby Levine, died Thursday after an 8-year battle with Parkinson's. We hold Alice, their daughter Stacy, and grandchildren Zach and Hope in our hearts this morning. And as we mark the winter solstice and the darkest day of the year on our blessed earth, we light a candle of joy for the light that penetrates even in the darkness. This week, at a global climate summit, nearly 200 nations agreed for the first time to transition away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, and tripling of global renewable energy capacity by 2030. While many skeptics see loopholes, do not think it goes far enough or fast enough, our candle symbolizes that something new has entered the world, a light of shared recognition that our best hope of preserving our blessed planet is us. For these and so much more, we invite you to come forward now to light a candle here in our sanctuary or wherever you may be.
next hymn is from the Teal hymnal. It's number 1034. It's called De Noche. And this song is in the Taizé tradition. We'll do it in English, then in Spanish, then in English at the end. And the point of the song is to use the repetitiveness of it to enter a more meditative state. So as we have the organ and the piano today, I hope that you can let the music wash over you.
By night we hasten in darkness to search for living water. Only our thirst leads us onward. Only our thirst leads us onward. De noche iremos, de noche, para encontrar la fuente. Solo la sed nos alumbra, solo la sed nos alumbra. By night we hasten in darkness to search for living water. Only our thirst leads us onward. Only our thirst leads us onward.
Our reading today is entitled Blessing for the Longest Night by Jan Richardson. All throughout these months, as the shadows have lengthened, this blessing has been gathering itself, making ready, preparing for this night. It has practiced walking in the dark, traveling with its eyes closed, feeling its way by memory, by touch, by the pull of the moon, even as it wanes. So believe me when I tell you this blessing will reach you even if you have not light enough to read it. It will find you even though you cannot see it coming. You will know the moments of its arriving by your release. Of the breath you have held so long, loosening of the clenching in your hands, of the clutch around your heart, a thinning of the darkness that had drawn itself around you. This blessing does not mean to take the night away, but it knows its hidden roads, knows the resting spots along the path, knows what it means to travel in the company of a friend. So when this blessing comes, take its hand, get up, set out on the road you cannot see. This is the night when you can trust that any direction you take, you will be walking toward the dawn.
Our meditation today is a journey into the desert. And so before we fully settle into our space, I want to invite you, if you don't feel comfortable or you just choose not to close your eyes, in addition to the candles and the chalice, we also have this stunning new backdrop created by Beacon member and artist Helen Kerr that creates a winterscape that's really stunning. So if you journey with me in this desert landscape in this winter time, let's begin with our breath and move it from high in our chest to deep in our belly, drawing in through the nose and then out through the mouth as sinuses permit. And another deep breath. Maybe you take a moment to roll shoulders down or loosen a clenched jaw. Maybe brows lower. Perhaps your hands open up on your lap and you find an ease in your being. I want you to imagine that you have come with me into that desert of white sands in New Mexico, formed by the retreat of the Permian Sea millions of years ago. All around you, for 360 degrees, you see white sand dunes. You are deep in the Chihuahuan Desert. And maybe you pick up some of this sand, noting it's not sticky, but dry from gypsum salt. It runs through your fingers and moves easily between toes. As your eyes adjust to the landscape, you notice some sand verbena with its soft pink flowers near you. A plant that is a reminder of surviving by growing quickly, even in desperate times. An Apache pocket mouse scuttles across the sand. This creature has created a coat that is much lighter than its nearby cousin, so that it can avoid the heat of the sun. It teaches us to shift, to adapt, to transform. But we, beloved, do not have to fear that sun because we are here at night. The coolness of the hour beneath a full moon reminds your body and your soul of the gifts of darkness. Life flourishes in the desert at night. Stillness holds you, and your own voice, perhaps that of the oversoul, can speak here at last. Let's wait a moment longer in this luscious quiet. You notice a yucca plant nearby, a plant that survives by growing tall and resisting being buried by the moving sand dunes. Perhaps you can ask here, what threatens, beloved, to bury you at this moment? How are you called to rise like this spiked plant, to grow tall toward a cloudless sky? Before we leave the sanctuary of white sands to return to the one here, there's one more plant of wisdom, the skunk bush sumac, forming deep, dense roots that foster life like the foxes who form dens in its pedestals. You, like this great plant, are rooted in community here, networked across these desert times. Take 2 more deep breaths and name those who sustain you. Call to mind with gratitude. Beloved, who sustain and hold you. Take 1 more deep breath with gratitude for the gift of Earth herself and your life on this blue boat home. On the learning from the Earth, on the connections with one another, on all that sustains us, holds us, and brings us back once more. As you're ready, maybe bring some movement to fingers or toes and return to this space, but bring the peace of the desert and also that generosity of Earth herself. As I invite Beacon member Stacy Lees forward, who embodies generosity in so many brilliant and beautiful ways. Stacy, would you come forward to share our testimonial for today?
I'll be honest, this is a kind of a personal nightmare, public speaking. So I'm so glad that I'm just here with some friends and soon to be friends. Oh, I can do this.
We love you.
My name is Stacy Lees. My pronouns are she, her. And for those who would like a visual description, I closely resemble a middle-aged Asian woman in a black floral dress. I joined Beacon 10 years ago with my family. My then husband had grown up in the Anglican Church, and I never fully embraced the Judaism with which I was raised. Sorry, Mom and Dad. So we came to Beacon. Service is my love language, and you may know that Beacon offers very many opportunities for service, and I grew so much in those experiences. I learned so much about myself. Running annual giving when I was 7 months pregnant, I learned that I had energy when I needed it. Looking after volunteers and our unhoused guests at Summit Warm Hearts during lockdown taught me that I'm a Gryffindor. I had no idea that bravery was something that was a part of me, and yet now I feel I can fully embrace that part of myself. Teaching RE, I learned that teaching is not one of my gifts. Early in the days of Summit Warm Hearts, I overheard one of our guests saying that they didn't like, air quotes, civilians around on Sundays, by which he meant us who were attending Sunday services. And at the time, they were here both during the day program and we were hosting them overnight as well. So they were here all the time and they were home and they felt like this was their home. And I felt kind of territorially, if I'm honest, that this was my home. And I realized that I think so many of us have our own unique connections to Beacon. I think youth group who've had lock-ins here have a special connection to Beacon, that meet groups that meet regularly, like community groups and choir, have their own personal connections to Beacon. Anyone who has made coffee or washed dishes downstairs, you're doing chores, you are home here. I think Beacon is large enough and varied enough for us each to have our own unique home here while simultaneously connecting us to one another. My next service challenge is the Spring Forward fundraiser, April 27th, and I need everybody's help with that. It is a huge, huge opportunity for us to embrace the creative, take a look at our gifts and share that creativity and our gifts in abundance with each other. And thank you.
Thank you, Stacy, and with gratitude for the abundance that takes the many lights you each bring here and the gifts that you have and the learnings of what's not our gift too, that together forms a beacon. We give great thanks, and our morning offering will now be most gratefully received. Thank you, Donna and Ron.
Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. Sing on just a little while longer. Sing on just a little while longer. Sing on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right.
Thank you, Misa. And thank you again, Stacy. Did you all know that she didn't have a script up here? She was just speaking from the heart. That takes a lot of courage. There's a lot of preachers who don't do that, and some who do, but not as well as you did. So thank you. Thank you. And if folks can imagine Summit Warm Hearts continuing to run in the midst of a global pandemic where we couldn't imagine how to do it, that's because of Stacy. So that's because of her leadership and commitment. Across the world's traditions, beloved, the desert is an ancient metaphor for a place of struggle, of discernment, and often a liminal space where we cross a threshold. In some traditions, it's also called the wilderness. I would guess that a fair number of us are familiar with some of the narratives from the Judeo-Christian story, whether it's Jesus in the desert, struggling with an angel who, in some iterations, is Satan. And Jesus in the desert, right, finds and hears the clarity of his calling. Or perhaps the Israelites who wandered in the desert for 40 years, and as the teaching goes, did so that the generation that could not imagine true freedom, could not live into the promised land, would pass, and the next generation would emerge from that desert, from that wilderness, with a new knowledge of how to live freely. There is, of course, Muhammad in the cave and the Buddha beneath the tree. And we, Unitarian Universalists, we have our own little story of living as a recluse and seeking wisdom in the wilderness with the transcendentalist Thoreau, right? Who pitched a tent. All right, it was a cabin, if you've been there. It's not exactly a tent. It wasn't exactly removed from all civilization and life, but nonetheless, Thoreau did remove himself regularly from the busy, bustling world into nature in order, in his words, to discern deeper truth. Ancient cultures in the northern hemisphere, going back to the Druids, saw desert times in winter. They stopped and looked into the winter sky at the winter solstice, and they waited, often around a fire, sometimes a tree that had been cut down and burned throughout the night until the sun returned. Now, they didn't do this. I've heard some people tell the story as if ancient peoples didn't know the sun would return, which I think is a little insulting. But they did it not because they were afraid the sun wouldn't return, but because of a ritual, a reminding of what it is to live in the rhythms of light. So many of the first peoples knew that the earth herself needed this fallow, seemingly dead time in order to have the genesis of spring and summer. There was a cycle in nature, and so too it was mirrored in humanity. Some sociologists and movement experts are now saying that we find ourselves in a cultural, a political, even a spiritual desert time or winter time. It's a time when, although we are flooded with information, we are also the most easily misinformed generation and information abused generation. There is a great amount of political despair among many of us as nationalist and right-wing leaders rise across the globe and in some cases even gain power despite deep democratic movements. As one elder said to me recently in pastoral care, "Robin, it is a terrible time to die. All that I've worked for some days seems to be dissolving." And there is, too, a sense in this uncertainty of what's even possible anymore. A kind of deeper spiritual despair has taken hold among many people. Combine that with anyone who is encountering and moving through personal grief at this time, and you can see why the holly jolly seems a little hard right now. Our culture, at least in the US, keeps us so busy all the time. There's such a pressure to be busy, to be occupied, a competition of having your calendar full or overfilling to the brim. But many of you know that being busy doesn't mean a purpose-filled life. And I've been wondering lately, when the lights are always on and it's forever daytime, when is the time for sacred rest and dreaming? Could the despair that many people are naming be in part from the dislocation of ancient rituals and practices that kept us in the cycle of winter solstice, of slowing, of silence, of blessed darkness that could hold us, gather us, inspire us, and midwife something that we cannot imagine in an unending, blistering light of day. Truth is, nowadays, you can completely avoid the winter solstice if you choose. You can keep the news on and the media running until late into the night. You can have it operate even in your sleep. You can ensure that technology dictates the pulse of your morning and the pace of your day. You can fill your life with meetings and time with loved ones, with being with them in 3 places all at once, and by consequence, never really being anywhere. Years ago, I went on a silent retreat in New Mexico. It's where I picked up that map I showed you early on. It was supposed to be a 5-day retreat in complete silence. It was deep into the desert, and no technology was allowed, and you didn't even have any kind of cell phone reception. And you had to put all your devices in a locker. It was pretty strict. I don't know why I went on it. But nonetheless, there I found myself in the desert without a laptop to open, without a phone to make calls. And about 36 hours into the retreat, I started feeling so uncomfortable with the silence. I wanted to claw my way out of the silent retreat. So I started finding people, like on their way to the labyrinth, or on their way to the chapel outside, or in corners in the hallways, and I would just say, "Hi, what's your name? What brought you here? What'd you think of lunch?" Nonsensical conversations just to fill the space with noise. About an hour after I did this, one of the Catholic sisters at the retreat pulled me aside and invited me to embrace the silence. I did try. I really tried. But it was later that same day when I was in the chapel and I leaned next to someone not able to take the noise of some bug that was crawling in the chapel that I could hear, not able to take the silence, feeling so anxious in it, that I said, "Do you think it's like too quiet in here?" That was when the sister pulled me aside again, and she just stared at me with the most compassionate, loving smile for like 45 seconds. And then she leaned in even more and said, "I don't think this is for you." She was so loving about it that I was at least 5 miles away from the retreat center in my car when I realized I'd been kicked out of a silent retreat. And I felt a little embarrassed. I don't like failing at things. So I don't know what possessed me, but I did turn off the iTunes. I even turned the air conditioning off in the car, and I rolled the windows down, and I just drove the remaining 3 hours in complete silence. It was in those 3 hours when I stopped running away from myself that I realized I didn't want to go into hospital chaplaincy, as had been my plan. I was in the middle of a program. And that I was going to fill that packet out, and as scary as it was, I was going to go into search for a congregation, not knowing if there would be a congregation who would call me. I think a lot of that drive. I think a lot about the gift that that silence and that quiet gave to me, and how much of my life across the last 15 years has been shaped by it. Yesterday, I found myself in another retreat, this time with 14 other ministers from across New Jersey. We're part of a ministerial cohort, and we meet once a month. We're from all different denominations and all different kinds of ministry as well. And we were there for our monthly gathering when the retreat facilitator stood up, and after doing kind of the announcements and check-in and housekeeping that you do, she said, okay, today everyone, we are going to create vision boards. Oh my God, I thought. A week before Christmas Eve, when I have so much work to do, I came to make a vision board? No way. And then she made it worse by saying, I want you to dream big. And all I could think about was the order of service. She said, I want you to ask yourself, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? What would you do? And what would your house look like? If my eyes could have rolled around in my head and down across the floor, they would have. And I felt several of the other clergy in the room kind of cross arms, start to get a little uncomfortable. Because the truth is, especially this time of year, most faith leaders are living deeply in the practical. And if you ask us to dream, well, you're going to get a little bit of an eye roll. So she said, start with these questions and just see where they take you. And she gave her own story about how asking these questions had totally transformed her life and how she'd moved somewhere and heard a whole different call. And I'm thinking, ma'am, I am just trying to hear the order of service for next week, okay? So my table mate and I started talking about the questions, but quickly we veered off. We both have young children. She's a minister in East Orange, and we see one another and travel in shared circles. And so we started talking about the practical, and we completely abandoned the dreaming of the questions. And it was then that the facilitator came over to our table and stood there with a really loving, compassionate smile. And I knew what was coming. She said, are you two dreaming, or are you doing the practical? And then she gave us a whole set of information about how important it is to dream. And I really tried not to say anything, but I haven't learned much in 15 years. And so when she was done, I said, that's all fine and well, but look, I have a lot of non-negotiables, okay? I can't just dream that I'm going to go wherever I'm going to go and I'm going to live in a house wherever. I have children, I have a spouse, I have a life, I have a community engaged in an incredible, really big project, and I can't just pick up and imagine myself in Australia or wherever. It doesn't work that way. Isn't this a little bit absurd? And I realized then that I'd gotten a little passionate and everyone had stopped talking. And she said, I just want to ask you, do you believe in something bigger than yourself? Anything? And I said, yeah? Your point? She said, well, maybe believe in a life bigger than you can conceptualize in this moment. Maybe believe in a community and friends you can't even imagine that could be created. Maybe believe in a world that you can't calculate and plan if you only live in the details. Maybe believe in something and live in something more abundant than you are right now. It's hard when you realize you didn't learn a lesson you thought you learned over a decade ago. Or that you're just coming round it and you've woven yourself even more tightly into a problem. So I took a breath and realized she was right. I had this hour and a half. I had set it aside on my calendar. So I thought I would give it a try. And what surprised me was that I didn't hear some dream to go live in some sunnier, sandier, warmer place than I am now, free of any children or responsibilities. What surprised me, and I guess I was maybe afraid of those things, that I'd hear I should go open a cafe in Mexico, never to be heard from again. But what surprised me instead was that I heard a deeper call here and now. I listened to the heart of my heart and realized that although silence for the sake of silence is absurd, silence for the sake of dreaming, for the sake of the rhythms of the earth that are also woven in us, is anything but absurd. If we really believe in something bigger than ourselves, however you name that, however you experience it, then we must also believe in rhythms and patterns and processes and possibilities that are bigger than our singular lives can conceive. I heard a deeper call here. And the silence was not the absence of sound, but the presence of listening. And the roots held me, and I remembered I can grow quickly and tall, and that darkness has dreams to share. I know there are many reasons you can't dream. You can't cease the endless flow. I know the eye roll. I can see it. But the first peoples before the world was forever daylight and wired told us how to live impossibly, to grow quickly and respond to the world as a dance, to also go out at night and dialogue with the wild, fearless moon, to grow tall and refuse to be buried until your life is truly over. And when all seems lost, like that sumac, to hold on, for deep roots can source unseen waters and quench even the greatest thirst. I wish for you, beloved, the courage, even in the midst of the cynical and the eye roll, or even as the excuses come, I am too old to dream, I am too busy to dream, I am too young or too sad to dream, or too exhausted to dream, too busy to dream, to just let the soft being of your being be held in the night. Embrace these desert times and this coming winter solstice. Dream with me, for that is the impossible end to the brutality and despair. There in the quiet darkness, a new world needs our tending, our listening, our midwifing, our stillness. May we be faithful to what we cannot yet know. May we allow a little more mystery to hold us. Amen.
Our closing song is in the gray hymnal. It's number 226, People Look East. So will you rise in any way possible and join in singing this song of hope?
Make your house fair.
you here in the sanctuary to take hands with one another. And those online, if you have a beloved companion near you, whether human or otherwise, to take hands or simply reach out toward mine. Beloved, may you trust what the eye cannot see nor the mind fully calculate. May you look to the moon in the coming days in the winter skies, for she has stories to tell you. Hold on and look east. The sun will return from the deepest night by a mystery greater and older than you or I. May you live abundantly in the mystery, knowing the love that is our source and ultimate return. Amen.